Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Watertown City Council meeting of Tuesday, January 16, 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson? Bueller? Danforth? Lalum? Absent. Manti? Here. Roby? Absent. Solom?
Here.
Thorson?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
All right. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion and second?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Bueller, second by Manti. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second?
So moved.
Moved by Vilhauer.
Second.
Second by Y. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Third item on the agenda is presentation from South Dakota Municipal League Workmen's Comp Fund for the City of Watertown for 30-year anniversary. And Kristen, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have Brad Wilson here, and I think he's got a few things to say, and then the presentation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to come in tonight. I'll keep you on time here, so this won't take very long. But I'm Brad Wilson. I'm the administrator for the SDML Workers' Compensation Fund. I've met several of you at different Municipal League meetings. But just a little bit of background of what the SDML Work Comp Fund does. We provide the workers' compensation coverage for Watertown and 462 other public agencies in the state. It's all we do is provide work comp coverage to cities, counties, conservation districts, and we write pretty much all of them. Back in 1987 is when this fund was started, so we're actually in our 31st year, but because of the blizzard in December, I'm behind a month. So actually, we're in our 31st year, but we're celebrating our 30-year anniversary. Back in 1987, there were 52 charter members, and the city of Watertown was part of that. They were number 4. You remember number is number 4. So Watertown has been part of this fund in the beginning, since the beginning. Fast forward now to 30 years later, we have 463 members. So with Watertown being there right at the beginning during the celebration, the reason for my visit is to present the city with a plaque, just recognizing them and thanking you for your membership and long-term membership with the SDML Work Comp Fund. And one other note is that the South Dakota Municipal League does endorse the SDML Work Comp Fund as well as the county association. So without further ado, if the mayor would mind if I approach and present the plaque. Protection here will be Kristen for safety. Thank you very much. And I do have to say that you have great staff. They're never on the naughty list. Everything goes very, very good. Thank you.
He said the City of Watertown staff is never on the naughty list. Good job, staff. All right, the next item on the agenda is item number 4, appointment of Assistant Finance Officer. Kristen?
Thank you. I'm requesting council approval of the appointment of Christine Crom as the Assistant Finance Officer with a start date of January 17th, tomorrow. And yeah, we look forward to having her as part of the team, and she will be attending the council meetings starting in February. So thank you.
Very good. Is there a motion and a second for approval?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Bueller, second by Danforth. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Christine is appointed. So we have Kristen and Christine.
I just had to yell Chris in the
Item number 5 is ordinance number 17-48, amending section 21.54 of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown regarding GT1 Gateway Overlay District. And I think I'll wait for a motion on this and open the public hearing first, because I think we have some people in the audience that want to talk about this. So the public hearing is open. Is there, well, before we get to that, Shane, do you want to give a summary?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Gateway Overlay District, of course, is intended to monitor and somewhat dictate the appearance of buildings along the east portion of the community as people come in off of the interstate and into the community. It is primarily bounded by Highway 212 on the south, 19th Street east on the west edge, and Willow Creek Drive kind of dissects it. It actually goes to the quarter section line north of Highway 212. But the primary focus of the Gateway Overlay District is to enhance the appearance of the structures that are built within that district. So we did revisit that some time ago because of a request that was done for a new building being constructed within that district. So we did put together a committee of staff, council members, and planning commission staff, and thankfully we also included a local architect, which greatly added to the context of the discussions and gave us a lot of things to consider. As a result of that, the changes to the Gateway Overlay District became somewhat significant, but not over encumbersome in our view. The Plan Commission did review these ordinance changes and did make some changes to the recommended ordinance, and that's reflected in these documents as well. So particularly there was an accent metal percentage that was recommended at 15%, and the Plan Commission voted to approve a 20% access metal component for the anything not facing the rear of the lot. So all side yards and front yards would have the restriction of 20% metal components on the front. I'll kind of quick walk through the changes if you put my screen up on the thing. One of the first things we discussed was prior to this review, it was a Mayor's Planning and Zoning Committee, which consisted of at least 6 administrative officials to be a quorum. That reviewed these issues. We eliminated that committee and brought these issues before the Plan Commission in lieu of. So we struck items 3 and 4 of 21.5402 accordingly. Then we kind of perusing through the rest of the ordinance.
Excuse me, Shane. Councilman Vilhauer has a question.
Shane,
Sure.
before I forget to ask the question, okay, it goes to the Planning Commission, or without the Mayor's Committee, it goes to the Planning Commission if somebody thinks they have a strong argument for exceptions to this. Okay, from the Planning Commission, would it still then come to us then as a council after the Planning Commission weighs in on it?
At this time, we're proposing that the Planning Commission makes the final decision.
Okay.
Now that's with regard to compliance to the ordinance or not.
A matter of interpretation can be done by the Plan Commission, and it doesn't have to come further to the council. If there's ever an ordinance change, if someone is allowed to use a material that isn't listed, and that goes to the Plan Commission and they approve that, then we would entertain an ordinance change so that it applies to everyone equally.
Correct. And so the bulk of the heavy lifting happened in 21.5414, where we talk about building construction and in particular materials. And as you can see, we struck some language that referred to all exterior buildings that be proposed to have earth tone and color shall be referred to the mayor's planning and zoning committee. So because we struck out that committee, that whole item went away. Then of course the numbering system changes. But we did do a lot of review and discussion of the various building materials that are available to the community, and that's where the architect's information and knowledge carried the discussion a long ways. So primary point of review was item J on here, metal siding, and it does allow for some lap seam metal panels or sheet or corrugated panels are allowed with certain aspects. For instance, on any wall facing a rear yard, on any wall facing a front side or side yard used as an accent, including not more than 20% of said wall. And then, of course, it puts a restriction on there. No variance may be granted or authorized to more than 20% of any wall facing front or side yard utilizing metal siding. So that was some good clarity that was provided so that city staff and the Plan Commission have some well-set rules to follow. We do talk about another component here is the exterior of the building shall have a varied and interesting detailing. Large unadorned walls shall be prohibited 50 feet or more is identified. Large walls facing Highway 212 and any public street must be relieved by architectural detailing, such as a change in materials, change in color, offsets, or other significant visual relief provided in a manner or at intervals in keeping with the size, mass, and scale of the wall and its view from the public right-of-ways. A distinct change in color or pattern may be considered as a change. That is a very intentional paragraph. It does prevent, I'll call it monotonous views along the side of a large building. So with that, then, yep. Correct.
Can you zoom in? I mean, if you ever try to watch it,
I know.
on TV,
I'm hoping people are following.
from here either, so.
I'm hoping people are following along in their program, but
But for our TV,
Yep.
Thank you.
so anyway, I was reading Article 2 there, and Article 3 talks about materials that meet purposes at these regulations and designed, intended, and are approved by the Plan Commission. So that was a clear thing that that it does need to go to the Plan Commission for any variance of these materials that were discussed. I guess with that, I'll leave my description somewhat brief. We've talked about this in great detail before. Another item that was struck from this ordinance and reserved is 2154.18. It just wasn't language that was required anymore within this ordinance because of the changes that we made. So with that, I'll leave it to other discussion.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak before I invite the public?
Just a point of clarification to piggyback on what Glenn had asked. Historically, Shane, if something goes to the Board of Adjustments and there is a dispute there or a disagreement, then the only remedy is circuit court, correct?
That is correct on a Board of Adjustment.
Right.
However, this is not
Okay.
to be heard by the Board of Adjustment. It's by the Plan Commission.
Right. And a normal, outside of this document, if there are any disagreements within the Plan Commission, that the remedy is to bring it to council, correct?
I believe that would be the path.
Okay. So is that the same here? Or is the Plan Commission the absolute and the end of it? If there is somebody that there's still a disagreement in here with, does this then come to the council? Is that, Glenn, in a way that you were kind of heading with it?
Well, that's a question I was getting at too.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding now. What I heard is that unless it's actually an ordinance change, it would not come back before the council. So if there's just a dispute or a disagreement, it sounds like the planning commission is the final decision maker, unless it's actually an ordinance change.
Okay, so the only board in the community that can override the ordinances, as I understand it, is the city council. So if there's anything that would circumvent a decision by staff or the planning commission regarding this ordinance, it would have to come before the city council for amendments or approvals or something other than, the staff and the planning commission don't have the authority alone to change the ordinance. And this ordinance is written specifically in a certain way to define the limits in the Gateway Overlay District, and any change to that would have to come through the city council.
But there is interpretation that's in here, and there's certain levels of leeway in here through this whole document, not just the area that we've primarily focused on, which has been the materials, right? There could be some things in there that are either interpreted or a leeway given or not given that could come to question. And when that happens, what happens? What's the course that the person that is in disagreement, what path do they take? Right now, if setting this aside, Plan Commission items and may not deal with an ordinance change, their recourse is to request it or bring it to the council. My guess is that's the same thing we would do here.
I'm trying to recall if, let's take the way a variance would go to a Board of Adjustment, if that's ever gone anywhere beyond the Board of Adjustment in our history in Watertown. I know other communities have had people sue. I don't believe we ever.
I don't know if we have or not, but we do have a defined process, though.
For
Mayor.
Board of Adjustment, yes.
Yeah, Board of Adjustments. The recourse is circuit court. It can't come. They can't come and yell at you and get you to change it.
Right.
You don't have, or me.
The Plan Commission is not a quasi-judicial body like the Board of Adjustment is. So an action, if someone is appealing the higher standard, the Plan Commission has some leeway on determining if it fits within, if it's a matter of interpretation or not. And if the Plan Commission would say, no, it's not, and deny it, the person would have the ability to appeal to the council, I suppose. Am I right, Matt?
Yeah, I think that individual would have the ability to seek an ordinance change.
Yes.
Through the council.
Right.
Well,
Or seek a clarification that is favorable to what they were arguing.
Okay, so it's really going to follow the same path that we would normally have for I'm going to call it a dispute, at the Plan Commission level. It would follow that normal path, and that would be to come to the council. It may or may not be an ordinance change. It could be a interpretation. It could be something within this ordinance, but it might necessitate us to look at it and look at an ordinance change. But so it is going to follow the same path for problem resolution that we have traditionally used, and that is, if it gets to that point, it can be brought to the council.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember back if we had people come to us. And, Mike, did we have folks come to the Planning Commission meetings with an agenda item that said we need an interpretation on this? Do you recall that?
Well, it could be
because I don't. That's where you brought it up, and I think that's a pretty good question. How that's done? What's the process for making an interpretation on the ordinance? That's a difference, altogether different than if somebody needed to get a variance and wanted to take the Board of Adjustments.
Right. It would be an agenda item, and I don't know that we even have a fee for that. It would be put on the agenda, and the board or the plan commission would act on it as a body. They're interpreting these higher standards in a way that similar to what the Board of Adjustment would do, but since these are higher standards, the Plan Commission is the root of those standards, and they would be able to see the interpretation or not. And if they would be in favor of granting a request for interpretation, they can order an ordinance change or start the process of an ordinance change. The council can start that, or the Plan Commission can start that, and request that the staff prepare the documents necessary for a clarification to the ordinance. That's their prerogative, and I think that was the thinking. If it's not clear what this ordinance says, you can ask the Plan Commission for a clarification.
So, yeah, I want to add a little bit to that. The primary goal here, I think, is kind of being lost in the discussion. There was concern about the staff and a small committee weighing in on the details for whatever projects come through the Gateway Overlay District. Number one, we wanted to not make that a staff decision. And number two, then it became apparent that the Plan Commission would be the best board then to weigh in on colors, what the appearance looks like, etc., because we enlist people from all over the community that have different expertises regarding those type of things or interest. So we didn't want those decisions to be made at a staff level, and I think that was a key component here, is that we wanted that decision to be made beyond the staff level. So that was one thing. And then if there's an appeal, we very well defined what's acceptable in the Gateway District by these changes. So then ultimately, if there's some other direction that we go, it would require an ordinance change and ratification by the City Council. Mayor.
I want to just clarify, part of this was my request to remove the Mayor's Planning and Zoning Committee, because it consists by ordinance of the mayor and 5 or 6 people that report directly to the mayor. And to me, that is, it's kind of like a glorification of the mayor's opinion on an item, and I didn't think that was appropriate, and people agreed with me. And so we take away the mayor's ability to force something on the staff. It just is ripe for misuse. That part of it is changing, but we could have left in the part that says anything denied by the Plan Commission may be appealed to the Board of Adjustment, because that's the sentence that you're concerned about. Was it used to be the Board of Adjustment could then take an appeal if they didn't like the mayor's committee's answer, then you could go to the Board of Adjustment. Now we took that away because we're saying the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission is the Board of Adjustment. So
yeah,
the Plan Commission going, then reverting to the Board of Adjustment seems silly.
Well, we've done the right thing in my mind. This is what we've done to take that committee away, to me, is the right thing to do. I think it makes for a better decision-making and a service to our community members. I think that's the right thing to do. My only question is historically, there's always been a path for remedy of disagreement. Okay, they could allow something. It could be somebody from the outside that says, no, it shouldn't be allowed. So it's not just a matter of them agreeing with it. It could be somebody that's disagreeing with the action that they did take. It may not be the requestor. So, but that's always been, at least to my understanding, in all the years that I was on the Board of Adjustments and Plan Commission, was if it's Board of Adjustments, the decision we make, your only recourse was Circuit Court. But anything within the Plan Commission that was disagreed to, your recourse was the council.
This would be the same.
Okay, that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to clarify. And I think, Glenn, I think that's what you were trying to get at. And I was
Right. But so again, it may not necessarily be an ordinance change.
Right.
If it's just an interpretation,
That may be where it
that could
ends.
still potentially come before us ultimately.
True.
and and we're saying is, does this allow that to take place? Is that the verbiage in here so that it stays? There has to be a method of recourse versus just that committee. Ultimately, the buck needs to stop right here, I think.
Do we have to?
I don't know that we say explicitly anywhere in the actions that the Plan Commission takes what the recourse is. It's understood that you can appeal to the council, but generally that would mean we think there's something wrong with the ordinance. And we'll look, if the council is in favor of going against a Plan Commission recommendation, then we should probably be looking at an ordinance change. Because the Plan Commission is interpreting the ordinance, and the only reason it would be appealed would be if it's denied, if the applicant is told no by the Plan Commission, then they would take it to the next higher authority, the council. And for the council to act against the Plan Commission, that's pretty serious business. You would not want to do that lightly. And because the Plan Commission, in good faith, is interpreting what the regulations written by the council say. So if the council thinks it's wrong, we need a clarification in the ordinance.
Okay.
Mayor, or go ahead.
Councilman Bueller.
Shane, help me out here. Let's just. I see you said you want to take the staff out of this because we had that review committee. If they want to build a building and they're talking about siding like we're discussing here, if they bring they have to come and get a building permit, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Typically, would it not be to the building official for making the determination whether or not they fit into the ordinance? Should it not be in their hand? If it's a sign issue, they determine that whether or not that sign fits or
correct.
You know what I mean?
I'll give you for example.
Let me just finish.
Sure.
If you bring it to the building official, the building official says, Leroy, that's not going to work. That's not going to fit. That's not right, and explains why that is. Then that person would have an opportunity to look for a variance. No. Can't we go in that direction?
No.
Because he's not, according to the building official, like anything else, he's not going to give him a permit because he's saying he doesn't fit into the requirements of the ordinance.
Not for these overlay district regulations, because these are higher standards. So in order to qualify for a variance, you have to be able to prove that you cannot use the land without the variance. That there's, and that you can't prove that. This is just a higher standard. So a variance makes no sense for the Gateway Overlay District. But if you're talking building permit in general, yes. If the building official says no, someone has the ability to challenge that to the Board of Adjustment. But that's different because they're still, it's their obligation to prove that they can't use the land without the variance.
Well, there's 7 criteria from the state of South Dakota that you have to follow. You have to look at for a hardship, and some of those have some gray area to them. There's no question about it, and that's why we have a Board of Adjustments.
But you have to meet all 7 requirements. It's not like
no
pick and choose one of these.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I disagree with you on that one. That if you can look at one of those hardships and show that there's a hardship out of those 7, you don't have to meet them all. If you can show there's a hardship, it's up to that Board of Adjustments to make the determination whether or not that person can move forward with that they can go outside that ordinance and they'll allow the variance. I have to disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
So for moving forward with this.
Can I make a recommendation? It seems like a lot of this language or discussion has been related around the area I have up on my screen right now, and that's 21.5402. We struck out, of course, this is where the main change from the Mayor's Planning and Zoning Committee occurred, and it also struck out any item 4 said any proposed project within the Gateway Overlay District which is denied by the Mayor's Planning and Zoning Committee, which we could substitute Planning Commission, may be appealed to the, and we could insert City Council there. Is that the language that we're potentially seeking? And I guess for that matter, in Article 3, just above it, we could substitute Mayor's Planning and Zoning Committee for Plan Commission and then still retain some of that language. That's just a
what
question.
you're saying is we could add a sentence that says any proposed project which is, or interpretation that is denied by the Plan Commission may be appealed to the City Council, just to clarify that that's an option.
He's talking about item number 4.
I really think that you really can't even be denied, because I might be on the other end of that. I might be the one where they approve something and I'm on the outside looking in going, no, that shouldn't be. So really it's any decision that they make that comes to question by either party, some party. I mean, we have had variances that have been given to people where we have had, now granted it's a variance, but where we've had opposition to those variances. And so you're always going to have that as a possibility. So all I'm saying is any decision that is ultimately made, good, bad, or other, you have to have the right for recourse. There's got to be a defined recourse. And it could be that I request something and they grant it, and it might be Josh over here saying, no, that's not right. And he has to have the ability to have his voice heard. So it really wouldn't be that anything that they denied, it's any decision they make.
Okay, this is a chapter in Title 21, which is the zoning ordinance. And I'm thinking, and Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that any action that is challenged to the Plan Commission would have the same recourse in this that it has anywhere else in Title 21. And so if we're not clear on that now, what that is, we're still not clear after we pass this. If we are clear, we're still clear. This doesn't change that. This leaves it in the same either clarity or confusion. We're not changing that state. So maybe we need to look at that next as to what would happen with a further. But for now, these are a subset of our zoning ordinance, which are higher standards, and we're proposing some changes to them tonight. The Plan Commission has recommended some changes. They are willing to add some of the metal to a maximum of 20%. If you would want to change that number or any other piece of this in a substantial way, we'll have to take it back again for another second hearing, or second reading, and action at a later date. But if you would go less, I don't think that would be substantial. If you would change that, say that number 20, which was the big hot item for the Plan Commission, they were not unanimous on that. They did pass 20%. Some wanted it lower, some wanted it higher, and they compromised on 20. And if you would want to change that lower, I don't know that that would be substantial. If you want to make it higher, we probably will be looking at another second reading at the next council meeting. Does everybody understand that part of it? Okay. Anything else before I invite the public to comment? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to weigh in on this? Please state your name for the record. Yes, he looks very familiar.
Only once, okay. Bill Riefenberger, Hometown Building Center. I think it's nicer sitting on this side of the fence. Jane, if you could, that 21,541 or 5414, that section 2 is basically where I want to put my comments towards. I know these things get long, so I'm going to try to focus and not get into all the lines on there. But that's the section that talks about the exterior of the building shall have varied, interesting detail. My concern is, I know there's issues with Travs, and I'm supportive of what some of Travs wants to do, but this is a bigger issue than that, because any business that wants to build out there, whether it's local or come to town, this is, to me, very vague and very subjective. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions and see if you can even give me the answers to them. Just take that very first sentence. The exterior of the building shall have a varied and interesting detail or detailing. Okay, who decides that? And how do you know? And I mean, that to me is very subjective. That's, you would tell me one thing and you'd tell me another. I don't see that being very focused at all. And then you go, the next section says, large unadorned walls shall be prohibited 50 feet or more. Just, you know, today, I just looked at this today, and this afternoon I went out and drove around. The event center wouldn't qualify. There's east wall is 80-some feet long, and it's just siding past that entryway. That kind of building couldn't be out there. There's obviously the based on the restrictions on this, the wellness center could have never been built out there. Most of the city buildings we have wouldn't qualify for any of this, based on what I can see. But what would you interpret that to say, that varied and interesting detail? Just start with that first part, because it gets.
That's described in the rest of the paragraph, though. That's the words following it are what they mean by that.
Okay, so what constitutes an unadorned wall?
A wall of the same color and pattern, and if you add a different color on part of it or change it in some way so that it's not all the same for over 50 feet.
Not to pick on anybody, but where the heck does Hobby Lobby fall into this? That's a large white building. And that's in this district already. I mean, what's adorned about that?
And I didn't look at that. I know others did, though, and Ken was talking about that.
But so if it was a brick or stone, but it's all one color, that's not adorned.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd want a change in color or a change in the architectural detail in some way. An overhang or a different material, or.
I do know that I had asked the question in regards to the Hobby Lobby building, and I think the fact that it steps down,
yes, that
was
right.
The area that they felt broke up that wall. That was, I think, the.
Well, I didn't take a picture today, but I drove by, and that the west wall is just a straight wall, flat concrete.
Right, but it steps down. It's stepped at the top. Bill, I went and looked at that because I had the same question.
Okay, so let's take Travs. It has a roof pitch. It slopes up. It doesn't have steps in it. It has a slope. So the problem I'm trying to get to is this is pretty ambiguous. It's like it's going to be up to somebody, a group, whoever you decide, is basically going to be able to just how they feel. And as that group changes, the next guy comes and implies he might get something completely different because they feel different about it. I just don't feel that this. I understand the intentions. I think sometimes good intentions just don't cut the mustard, because I really feel this is going to be. I wouldn't know what to draw up for somebody based on this. And you think somebody coming to town, if you wanted a Cabela's or something like that, then they hire an architect and they put a plan together and they come back and say, "No, you got a 60 feet of wall here that doesn't have any change in it. Go back to the drawing board." You know what they're going to tell the city of Watertown if you start doing that? Not coming.
Mayor.
Councilman Bueller.
Bill, you were part of the council, I think, back when we talked about this originally, and how it got to all this detail, honestly, I can't tell you. But I do know that we talked about corporate looks. You know, because when we brought this to the forefront of how we were going to protect that whole area out there aesthetically, one of the things we talked about was some kind of corporation that comes in, somebody exactly like you were talking about. If it was a Cabela's or whoever, they've got a particular look, and we would have to review those, and that would probably be something that we would allow. And I don't know if that's Hobby Lobby's look. I guess it is.
You know what you're saying, Bruce, though, is you've got somebody else that's making his own corporate look, and that doesn't qualify. But if somebody else brought one in as part of their corporate look, well, we're going to change the rules. I don't agree with that. I don't see how that's...
Well, the group did try to be explicit in what they meant by varied and interesting means. And it's pretty specific. Relieved by architectural detailing such as a change in material, change in color, offsets, or other significant visual relief provided in a manner or at intervals in keeping with the size, mass, and scale of the wall and its view from the public rights of way. So it might come to a matter of interpretation by the Plan Commission, and they're the ones that recommend this ordinance to the council for approval, and they have the foresight. They're the ones that put this whole overlay district together, and I guess you can worry that you'd have a different appointment of different members on the Plan Commission that might have a different answer to different people, but I think they do attempt to do a service to the community in interpreting the proposal in light of the regulations and the intent. And you have to kind of rely on them. I mean, absent that...
Well, to speak to it today, I only have one instance and that's Trav's that's asked for anything. And you take the front of his building as it's laid out now, he's got 4 sections to the front of that, all which are bigger than 50 feet. And you're saying he can't put the same, he has different colors on
but
different ones.
they have different colors. Some of them have rock on the bottom or a different material.
So now we're okay if it's a
right.
If it's a horizontal
yeah, there's a
change,
visual break of some sort. It can be vertical or it could be horizontal. Some break, so it's not just all one color, one texture for a mass area. No, I mean even a window in it is probably
well. I mean that obviously, but okay.
Breaks it up.
But Mayor, that's your comment as a window. What is the plan board going to say? A window constitutes enough of a change? I just feel.
Well, it would be a change
really
in material. It goes
be
from wood to glass or from stone to glass. The intent is to prevent just a mass stucco wall, because stucco is an allowable material, and a big brown stucco wall 50 feet greater than 50 feet in length would not qualify. But if they broke it up with color or texture or some other detail, then it would be compliant.
Mayor, just for clarification on something, to go back to what a couple things that Bill had said. So if we had a 200-foot long building and we had brick on the bottom and stucco across the top, 200 feet, that would be sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. To go back to Bill's question about roof pitch.
This has nothing to do with the roof.
Well,
The breakup.
it kind of does, because that's what we looked at with Hobby Lobby, right? When you look at the side, you're seeing the
right,
step
but
down.
we're specifically talking about the walls.
No, we're talking about the side and
Large unadorned walls.
right. And what we said was the step down qualified as an adornment, if that's a word.
I
You see what I'm saying?
Picture in front of me because I don't recall.
It just goes. The
Like
the
this.
concrete panels go and they step down and they go and they step down.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Starting from the front of the
My
facade.
Bill's question is then, if it's a slanted roof, does that not qualify? Whereas step down does.
I guess the bigger
Right.
problem to me is we we could argue about what is or isn't. I just think it's vague enough that it's going to be. You said the word a number of times tonight, interpretation, and it's going to be a varied interpretation. It's getting it down to somebody. I like the look of that, or I don't like the look of that, and I don't know if that's the right thing.
No, I don't. I would have to disagree with you, Bill. I think it's saying that there should be changes, not things that people like, but changes. So it's not all one uniform color, texture, whatever. Even color is enough to break it up. We say that right in here. Or it can be a change in a vertical sense or a different material on there. Any of those would qualify. And that paragraph is meant to be read together, not sentence by sentence.
Can you put this up on the screen for me? Put it between the arrows. Is that the plan? That's a rendering or just a elevation that I drew up of Trav's, but take the left-hand side there.
Yeah, there's windows. I mean, the windows break it up. It's an architectural detail. A window is an architectural detail. You go from straight, whatever the siding material is, to a window frame, to glass, to a window frame, to stucco, to a window frame. That's broken up many times over on that side.
You say that to me now, but if I'm reading this, I don't see anything that I don't. To me, a window doesn't become an architectural detail unless it's something unique that's large or round or just a.
Councilman Manti?
What was that with a 12 by 12 window? That constitutes a window? I mean, I just still feel that this is so vague that.
I think when I'm going to try to summarize where my brain is going here. I think we're both saying the same things, except that what the mayor is saying is that as long as it changes, you're talking about a window could be 12 feet or 10 feet or round or whatever. Even though I don't like, say, a square window, as long as that has a window, there's no way to deny it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So as long as it's broken up, whether I like the window or not, if I'm on the plan commission and the guy comes and he says, I got this arch and this color and this thing here, and I say, God, that's an awful color and I hate that window, I can't deny it because it meets the requirements of this statement.
You are correct, and
okay.
That was the intention. I read it one way, and so I'm surprised that your interpretation isn't mine.
Well, my interpretation initially was that there needed to be a vertical break every 50 feet or less. That no more than 50 feet need a vertical break.
Well, not necessarily a vertical.
Something horizontal would do that.
A change of anything, color, material,
because
texture.
Then how does the 50 feet seems kind of like it's just an arbitrary number, but. Like you said, it could be a 200-foot wall, and you just put some stone on the bottom, then that qualifies as enough of a change.
Right.
So,
it's not just a big blank wall. It's got an architectural feature to it, other than just siding, without any windows or without any adornment.
If I can just follow up again, I just wanted to reiterate that the subjectiveness is taken out by the fact that they just have to meet this requirement of making the change. And I can't say just because I don't like something, as long as it does, as long as it makes the change.
Yes,
it has to be passed.
Exactly right, Beth. That's what the committee was attempting to do, was take out the subjectivity and leave the styling to the designer. We're not judging the style. We're trying to make this objective where anyone can see. All right, we can measure 50 feet. If you can measure 50 feet and there's, in that 50 feet, no change in any of these things we've listed, material, color, offset, visual relief. Your eye bumps into a window, that's visual relief. So I think the committee worked very hard to make this objective and not subject to any one person's opinion. And that's why someone can appeal to the Plan Commission if they feel they've been wrongly judged.
Well, but I guess, I mean, we've spoke to the issue that I have, and that is what constitutes relief, because my interpretation reading that was it's going to need something vertical to break
no, it doesn't have to be
that
vertical.
length of that wall up. And if you're saying that a window or something horizontal that changes in
Yeah.
color or
We're not
stone,
limiting it to a vertical change.
Well, it seems like that gives a fair amount of opportunity to put something on to make a change that.
Yes.
I guess we'll have to see what happens with that.
Right.
Mayor, I do have a question on that.
Councilman
Go ahead.
Albertson. was-
After having served 10 years maybe on the Plan Commission and Board of Adjustment, I think that is what comes up all the time, is making those judgments. And so I think, Bill, you might be right that everything isn't going to be spelled out. And if it were, I don't think you'd have these commissions either, because you wouldn't have to make those decisions. And I think that's part of what we do. I think we make those decisions, and we do our best job, because it was different for Hobby Lobby, and it's different for Trav's, and but people are saying, let's make it work, and they do the best they can with what they have. Trust me, I've been on it for years. So,
well, but Hobby Lobby, this piece of this wasn't in there when Hobby Lobby was, as far as
True.
saying that if they had to make some architectural change in 50 feet, that wasn't in there. I believe it did say they could use precast, but it was supposed to have some definition to it. Those are just flat and
I think they have stripes. I
can't
remember.
They just have a groove between the panels, whatever size panels, where they buttered them together. Yeah. There's no other relief in there. I mean, that might be questionable whether that's here nor there at this point, I guess. But I just was commenting that based on what I saw here, that building, I don't see how I would have. There's no windows or anything in that, so I don't know how. I mean, if you want to get as technical looking for something to say that it steps down, I think the only reason it steps down, the roof slopes, and they save some money by not making a parapet wall straight across. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't think it was done because it was to make it architecturally different, quite honestly.
Are you okay then, Bill, with this discussion, and then when the picture you showed us of Trav's with the windows and things like that, are you more clear now that,
I don't know where the back side comes into, but after reading this, I was concerned where we were even going on the front side of this thing. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I see. To me, that's broken up every 25. That's broken up all over the place. I'm good.
So, Mike Fairchild from Trav's Outfitter.
Yeah.
The question we'd had was a lot what Bill had brought up, and it's been answered to what we're looking for is satisfaction. However, I would say with conversations that we've had with individuals in the engineering department and the building officials, they're not interpreting it that way. They're thinking 50 foot or more of brick along the bottom does not constitute breakup. Windows across do not constitute breakup. So those are just first part conversations, and that was our concern, was like, okay, so what is it? From what I'm hearing from you, Mayor, and the rest of the council, that the windows constitute those band boards, basically having three colors. We have the steel Galvalume, which works to the 20% that we've got. We changed it to LP. It changes down again.
I know that the committee was saying, you know what, even if they just put a little bit of stone on the bottom, or that fake stone, or here and there a little column to break that up. So I don't know who you were talking to. Ken was on that committee, the building official. If it turns out that we can't agree on the interpretation of this, then we're probably going to go straight back to the drawing board. But I guess it will be up to the council tonight if they think this is passable the way it's written. If there are major changes that need to be made, then we won't be able to pass it tonight.
Okay, Mayor.
Well,
Councilman Bueller?
Bill, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you've thought about this, and I think you had some valid concerns. What would you do? I mean, what would you recommend we do to help I can see one thing, and I don't know if we can do it, but that would be like some graphic representations to go along with this ordinance that we could refer to.
Well, yeah, I guess if I were looking at that, then there would be something that said what you call an architectural change. If I didn't interpret that a window was going to cover that, quite honestly. So, or it didn't. I questioned whether horizontal would do it. I mean, you go over to the PD over here, and they've got all the same stone, but they have a lighter colored horizontal band, which makes them. I mean, that's a visual change in things. If stuff like that is adequate, that's fine. But I couldn't read that into this specifically because it seemed to me it's a matter of it's a matter of what you think this says and what I think this says is what I was concerned about. And I'm, you know, if I'm on the opposite side of that, how am I going to convince you that any different of it? And I just, with this discussion, I think this is on record what was talked about. If things look greatly different than that, then I think people can come back and say, well, you know, this isn't what we were told.
I guess I'll answer that one. The last sentence in Article 2 that we've been discussing at length clearly says a distinct change in color or pattern may be considered a change along that side of the building. That would explain the appearance of the PD's building where they threw a different colored layer or block in there or some other pattern. I think we clearly have that window open in this ordinance to allow the types of things that he's concerned about. But I at least that's the way I interpret it, along with the rest of the committee.
I'm surprised because I mean, I know the committee worked very hard to try to make it clear.
Well, and I'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Today is first that I looked at this, and in reading that was my concerns is horizontal qualifying for this? Because
absolutely
it didn't look like it to me first time reading through this. It meant to me that if we don't have some kind of a change in the wall popping out or a parapet or column or something else within 50 feet, that go back to the drawing board. And it's not what I'm hearing here tonight, and what I'm hearing I don't have a really problem with. I just don't know as things go on is who is going to determine that, I guess.
Right. Well, it would first be the building official. He would be the first person to look at a proposal and decide if he thinks it's compliant. If he thinks it's compliant, a permit's issued. If he thinks it's not compliant, he would inform the applicant, and the applicant would have a choice of changing it or taking it to the Plan Commission for interpretation if he feels that this is a misinterpretation.
You know, and again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm working with them on the exterior, but I have concerns greater than that. My concern was that we've got a large area that needs to be developed out there, and I don't want to see something major come and be shot down because they're frustrated.
I think in general, these standards are loosening, but they're trying to make it easier for development, but still at an attractive level, because this district is expected to look different and better than the rest of town. These are higher standards than we have throughout town. And the Plan Commission felt that we still want the overlay district to have higher standards, but we're loosening the requirement, like the blanket no metal is loosened. Now metal can be allowed under certain circumstances, and they didn't feel that was detracting from the overlay district. So it's giving more opportunity for developers to accomplish what they want to accomplish and still meet the code.
Well, but based on what you're telling me, what you felt this was, I'm comfortable with that personally, but that I just didn't see that in what I was reading. I didn't feel comfortable that was going to be the case. So,
Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Councilman Danforth?
Couldn't we, somewhere within this language, make some reference to vertical and or horizontal in regards to the remedy of the 50-foot? It seems like somewhere in here it should be able to be added. The second thing is, we talk about a window. You know, a window is a breakup. It's an architectural, whatever they called it, detail. What about the side of the building when you have to have ingress, egress doors, but let's call them egress doors for emergency purposes only? So I got a gray metal door on the side of that building. That's what I'm at.
I think a door is. I think it would qualify it for.
In that
Least.
case, as
Yes.
an egress only
Yes.
emergency door. Okay, that's why I just.
I think so. I don't know how it couldn't. I
So-
mean, it is a break.
So maybe what we
The
need to
eye
do.
sees it.
Maybe what we need to do is we've got a number of examples in here when we talk about the architectural detailing. Add windows and doors in there so that it's 2 words. Add them in there as features that can be used for this breakup. I mean, if that's a question, you might as well add it in there. It's,
To me, it just, like you said, if it just said something that vertical or horizontal change and/or windows and doors, that opens
That
up.
probably goes a long way.
Opens up a lot of possibilities at that point, I think.
and we're not changing the substance of this doing that. We're just adding clarity to it, from what I've heard tonight. And then secondly, Mike, if the current staff is interpreting this differently, we're kind of in flux on this thing a little bit anyway. I think that's a training issue. I think that's something that we've got to sit down with, and as people come and go or as new things are introduced, we just need to make sure we're all on the same page of what it's saying. Certainly taking the opportunity to clarify it as much as we can, but that might be a training issue.
I would agree wholeheartedly with you, and that's why we wanted to bring it up, so everybody was on the same page, the city council, the staff, the public, and everything. The only thing I'd like to ask, and I'm comfortable with what the discussion is and what you mean by breaking it up, and I think personally that I need to apologize first if I don't remember, if I don't do this now, I'll get in big trouble. Travis apologizes for not being here. He had to be out of town working. He wanted to be here, and thanks you all for your time. This number 3 where it talks about planning commission, and I'm comfortable with what it is, but what if someone has a question on the 50 feet and what constitutes a breakup? This only talks about being able to go to the planning commission for a material change. Talks about composition, how the proposed material promotes, a physical sample, a color photograph, and a sketch of the proposed material. Do you have to add something in there that talks about the interpretation of this 50-foot length?
Mayor,
I'm thinking.
may I? Again, would there be a problem with some graphic representations to help kind of really kind of show and
We've done that before.
clarify? Yeah,
That
we've done it
would
with
help.
signs. I know that. I
We
think
can
that might be
certainly add that.
beneficial to be able to see that for determination.
You
And
can use ours if you would like.
But, yeah, I think that would be helpful to, if somebody else is looking at doing something in town and they've got our architect may not be from around here, but at least if he can check into something and he's got something that he can say, okay, this should meet the standards based on what I read. And if there was something, I think even just what wording we talked about would change drastically already. At least it's just say doors, windows, and horizontal or vertical change. You've already got the color and the other options in there. I think that gives you a lot more latitude. I mean, it might have been there otherwise, but I couldn't see that it was for sure. I think that would be minor notes to this. I don't think it changes from what I understand, changes the context of what you were trying to do.
Right, and I think that that comment about the material and the taking it back to the plan commission was probably in there before we added extra language, and I don't know that was thoroughly thought out.
I took it as when it talked about material was
Material
something
is
new that
material.
comes up that
Yes.
that somebody that wasn't aware of or new that came out that's not covered underneath there, that gives them the option to say, yeah, that can be included.
Right.
Because there's always new stuff coming out all the time.
Right. How do you challenge the higher standard? Maybe we need to add a sentence in there about taking any kind of a challenge, not just a material, but any
design
challenge
or
to the
material.
ruling of the building official can be taken to the Plan Commission. We have that kind of language elsewhere.
Okay. No, I'm fine.
I
Okay, I'm gonna see if anybody else wants to talk, otherwise maybe you can get on to some other subjects.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this issue? Okay, so we're talking about some words which would probably constitute a substantial change. If you choose to add these words, we'll probably need to take this back for, this would be considered the first reading with an explicit description of the changes, and then the second reading at the next meeting in action. We don't have to redo the public hearing part.
What qualifies as substantial? Because really, the only thing we're doing in here, other than the last discussion point, which was taking it to the Plan Commission, really what we've done is incorporating what was already described as what's assumed in here.
Let's ask the attorney.
To me, it's
if we add
pretty
a provision to take any objection to the ruling of the building official can be taken to the Plan Commission, is that substantial?
Well, I thought we were talking about also adding pictures.
Yes.
So if we added pictures, I would argue that's substantial.
I also thought we were talking about adding additional clarification, such as vertical, horizontal windows, and some of that other description in number 2, which I think would be substantial as well.
I don't know if that would be substantial, but I think that the pictures maybe would be, and giving that extra outlet, I don't know. I guess. Councilman Albertson?
I would suggest that we don't do, in lieu of this project, that we don't do these changes if there's some question about it tonight. We certainly can bring this back in 2 weeks, disregarding Trav's Outfitter then, and put all these changes in at that time and make a change.
Okay, we're not talking about taking anything out.
No,
we're only
adding.
talking about adding words. So if we pass this tonight as is, and then went through the process to add more
Right.
language for clarification.
But not do that before we
can do
vote
that
on
in our
this.
own sweet time.
Right, do that differently.
That's true. Yep, right. So that would keep Trav's on schedule with his permit approval. This metal thing would be approved tonight.
So you're suggesting approve it as is and come back to those other items, is what you're
Right,
saying?
and we'd probably take that to the Plan Commission and just, we'd go all the way through. And I like clarification. I think that's a good thing. So, is anyone ready to make a motion?
So moved.
As is.
As is.
So we have a motion by Councilman Albertson and a second by Bueller. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. And I think that the staff has heard the...
I'm considering that we have a directive to revisit the Gateway Overlay District,
Yes.
and we'll formulate some language and vet it through the Planning Commission and then
Yep,
bring it to the
that
council.
would be good. Thank you. All right. Item number 6 is authorization for the mayor to sign the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, JDAI, Committee Memorandum of Understanding. And as you will recall, we had a presentation by Judge Means and County Councilman over what this is and why it is. And let's see here, where am I? Number 6. Just to summarize, this is a memorandum of understanding that various parties, including the county, Third Circuit Court Judge, City of Watertown, Watertown School District, State's Attorney's Office, Cottington County Sheriff, the Police Department, Department of Social Services, Department of Corrections, Boys and Girls Club, and human service agencies would all come together and agree to work cooperatively to address the purpose of this and attend meetings on a regular basis and so on there. It's all good. Is there anybody that has any questions? Councilman Vilhauer?
Mayor, I'm all in favor of this. As I understand it, we're not committing any dollars necessarily to
That's correct.
To this at this point.
That's correct. Any other questions? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to authorize the mayor to sign this agreement. Moved by Mantee, second by Vilhauer. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thanks for coming, Lee. The next item on the agenda, item number 7, is approval of proposal for subsurface exploration at the Watertown Regional Airport. And I see that Todd Sires here, airport manager, talk about this.
Yes, good evening. This is a geotechnical survey. This is core drilling, 14 holes in the apron surface for pavement design for the terminal apron. So we went out for bids, and Core Engineering came back low bid. This is federally covered under the grant, so this will be under the 95% match program for the terminal apron. So I would recommend Core Engineering to award this bid.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion? Moved by Solom, second by Y. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 8 is designation of Mayor Karen as Chief Executive Officer and Brandy Hanton, Urban Planner, to be the Community Rating System Coordinator for the City of Watertown. Shane, do you want to say anything about that?
Very briefly, CRS is a FEMA program that the city voluntarily committed to and did a great amount of work. Mayor Karen, you get the credit for that because you did that when you were versed at it as a staff member. But anyway, the program is intended to give the city breaks and the overall insurance rates that the community sees in its floodplain districts. Right now, we've met a level of 10% savings with regard to those rates, and we need to continuously recertify that program. And one of the items is designating your CEO and the CRS system coordinator, and this action will do that.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve those designations? Moved by Councilwoman Mantee and seconded by Danforth. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, in presentation of the 2017 Community Rating System Progress Report and authorization for the mayor to sign the 2017 CRS recertification form. And we had the presentation at the Public Works Committee. What you're actually approving is the Cottington County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan. That's a step that we need to take with FEMA, whether we're in CRS or otherwise. We still have to approve that, and the county has worked on that. So there was one change recommended to that. Item number 4 says item number 4 is to discuss why objectives were not reached or why implementation is behind schedule. We don't have any such situation, so we'll clarify that. Does anybody have any questions about this? All right, then I'll look for a motion to make that approval. Moved by Councilman Bueller. Second by Danforth. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10 is authorization for the mayor to sign a construction agreement with BX Civil and Construction, Inc. in the amount of $101,278.60 for the sanitary sewer replacement project number 1805 at the intersection of Highway 81 and 20th Avenue South. And I'd look for a motion and second, then I'll ask Shane to just talk about it a little bit. We have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Manti? Second by Thorson. Okay, Shane.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is related to the proposed South Dakota DOT transportation project, which will improve the function of the Highway 81 and 20th Avenue South intersection. They are proposing a roundabout, and the project before the council tonight is a portion of that work related to the sanitary sewer main utility and the revisions that we would have to do to our infrastructure to accommodate the roundabout change. So with that, the state prepared the project, and we had our consultant prepare plans in conjunction with that project. Both projects were let in December. The state awarded the project to BX Civil and Construction Incorporated from Del Rapids. And on the city's portion of the project, the engineer's estimate was $159,000. The low bid by BX Civil and Construction, as stated, was $101,278.60. Both the consultant, the wastewater department, and the city engineering staff recommend approval of this contract. And just for clarity, the funding for the project will come from the wastewater department cash reserves. So.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Is there any further discussion about this or questions from the council? All right, something else, Shane?
I do have one additional comment, and that's related to the timeline of the project.
Okay.
So the contract calls for 75 calendar working days, but not to exceed a substantial completion date of August 3rd. So reverse math, as engineers always do, that would look at a kickoff of approximately the week of May 20 would meet that August 3rd completion date. So that gives you an idea of the time frame of the project.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Ms.
When again, Shane? When is the roundabout scheduled to?
That's what he was saying.
But is it that 75 days right after, or
no? That's part. This project would be completed within that 75-day
this
project.
This is part of that project. We have to approve it because it's our sewer, and we're paying for it. So, any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item number 11 is authorization for the engineering department to move forward with plans for converting Kemp Avenue to two-way travel. And I would like to say, I know there's a couple people in the audience, and thank you for sticking it out. I didn't know those other items were going to take this long. Council action is not required for this improvement. As the mayor, I have the authority to make changes in this way to travel and transportation in our city. However, I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for me to do. I recognize that not everyone agrees, and I think the city council is a better representation of the community interests than any one individual, including myself. Therefore, I would like the council to rule on this, just so that we have some community acknowledgement that this is what we're doing as a community. And I'm not afraid to say what my opinion is, and I've spoken very publicly that I am in support of two-way travel on Kemp Avenue for a number of reasons. And actually, when I first heard about this 5 years ago, when we started talking about this, I was leery, and I was not in favor necessarily. I wanted to learn more, and I did some research. I participated in the charrette, and I watched things come about over time. And for the following reasons, I support changing traffic to two-way on Kemp. First of all, other communities have done this successfully, and the result's been positive. Wayfinding is easier, and commerce generally is improved by two-way travel on the downtown streets. My main reason for not wanting to do this before I changed my mind was long vehicles. I thought would block travel and make it difficult, and I think that is true. Long vehicles will block travel. However, this is the same width street as First Avenue South, and we have the same kind of long vehicles parked there. And what happens when you have a vehicle jutting out into traffic, you might have to wait for a clear passage for traffic in the opposite direction to pass before you go around. But I don't think that will happen very often. Vehicles, generally it hasn't been a problem. I have received far more positive than negative comments on the Kemp issue, as well as the response to changing First Avenue South to two-way travel. I have had a couple of negative comments, but overwhelmingly supportive comments about making that change. And I think that there is a perception that Kemp Avenue is narrower, and in fact, it is not. It's the same width as First Avenue South. I think that the tall buildings along Kemp give the feeling that it's a narrower street, and it's really not. People have measured that over and over. 3 different surveys have been completed with the result the same each time, favoring two-way travel over one-way. In 2013, the Walkabout survey was done. Then in 2015, the charrette was done, and incidentally, the charrette is where I changed my mind. There was so much data presented to the group at that event that and looking at other communities and what was going on before the change was made and after, and the results are positive in general. And then in 2017, the Chamber of Commerce did another survey, and all of these were favoring two-way travel. And two-way streets were converted in pairs to one-way streets decades ago in a kind of a pattern across our nation. And that was an effort to speed traffic through neighborhoods, and it was successful in doing that. It did work, but at the expense of commerce. And many communities have converted back to two-way in order to reverse the negative effects. It will probably slow the traffic down, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Fast-moving traffic isn't necessarily what we want on Kemp. We want commerce on Kemp. And Kemp is now a solitary one-way street. There is no pair to it since we converted First Avenue South, and so balance will be restored with having everything back to two-way. And I would like to add that urban renewal boards, past and present, have supported two-way travel, and that's something that I think is important. Delivery vehicles do cause delay. I can't deny that, but they cause delay on our other two-way streets in town, and it isn't a big deal. I don't think that's, in my opinion, a reason not to move forward with the conversion. So I think this is the right thing to do for our community, but I will leave it to the council to make that decision on behalf of your constituents. So with that, if anyone's ready to make a motion, or we can discuss it first and then look at a motion. If they're ready to make one, please make one. Otherwise, I will ask the audience if they want to speak about this.
You want the motion first?
I think if you're ready to make a motion, I would like a motion.
I would like to make the motion.
Okay.
To make the change as presented to us.
Okay.
I would make the motion to
Authorize the engineer.
authorize the engineering to finalize plans for the conversion to 2A.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Danforth and a second by Bueller. And with that, this is not a public hearing, but I see that you're in the audience, and I think there's several people with strong feelings about this, and I welcome you to come and state your case if you'd like.
I'm not sure that it's going to do any good, but push down here. Okay. I guess there's just a few business people that have some real concerns about this, and yet I don't feel that the business people have been allowed to be heard. And some of the issues, I guess, that we are, and it's not just me, I've had people say that they would have liked to have come tonight, but because they didn't know about it until a couple days ago, they already had commitments made and so forth. But there are several businesses that have no other way but their front door to receive merchandise. Therefore, we're going to have trucks stopped in the middle of the road. How do people go around them, causing different kinds of problems as far as the retail go. The angle of the parking, are we changing the angles so that it's going to be at a different angle? And if we are we going to be losing parking spaces? I mean, these are just some questions we feel we have not been told how it's going to work or what it's going to do. When you compare First Avenue South to Kemp, you know, there's only 2 retailers on First Avenue South. And retail has a different kind of issues that we have to deal with compared to somebody that's on the second floor that has their own parking lot and customers maybe come to them once a day. I mean, we're just looking at different kinds of things there. The Chamber's survey that, Sarah, that you mentioned, 29 were in favor of changing and 27 were against, and 8 or 9 said they didn't care. That's really not a mandate that this is going to be the right thing for the uptown. Other communities that have converted back, Aberdeen, Mitchell, Sioux Falls, they all have one-ways. And they have parallel streets that are not of the same. So it shouldn't really matter whether or not First Avenue South is one way or a different way than what this is. The charrette was a great brainstorming session, and I know, I went on Friday night and Saturday, and I heard some of the most super ideas there that I know a lot of us uptown would love to have somebody be able to pay for and do some of those things, because it's the activities and the promotional things that are going to draw people to the uptown. That's what's going to take. It's going to take for us to get more people to taking part in it. The fact that it's one way versus 2-way, I don't think is necessarily the main thrust of the whole thing, but it is going to cause a lot of commotion and a lot of problems. When you made the comment, Sarah, about Passport, I served on the Urban Renewal Board for several years. We talked about this issue many, many times, and it was always decided that it is not in the best interest of the business district, the businesses, retail businesses, to make this a 2-way street. Plus, we always had the recommendation of 3 chiefs of police that said that it will open us up to more accidents. And I guess that's why we always tabled it and never took it any further than where it was. So I guess we just are concerned about some of the issues that are going to be coming about and how they're going to be handled, what they're going to be doing, what is that going to be doing to the angle of the parking, and some of these types of things. And
I would like to answer your question. You had a couple questions. The angle will change, and I don't know if you have the exact angle, and there will be lost parking, but we have had lots of comments in the engineering department, even with the one-way, that it's difficult to see, and there's not enough room. You can't, in order to move out, and these parking changes were probably necessary in order to make visibility better, whether we change or not. We aren't in compliance currently with our ordinance in terms of the setback of parking spots from crosswalks and street intersections. We're not in compliance with the manual on traffic control devices that recommends that's not a rule that we have to follow like our ordinance is, but we're moving in the right direction by eliminating some parking spots. And there was a presentation by the engineering department at the Public Works Committee, and he pointed out at least several locations where we can pick up additional parking spots, and we'll be probably looking into that. There is a net loss in the proposal of 11 out of 8 blocks, which is 4 or 5% of the parking downtown will be lost, but we can make up 8 or 10 of those with those other spots that Shane pointed out. So, what's that? Yes, and there's still lots of parking in the parking lots, and we continue to improve.
Customers aren't going to park in the parking lots, so.
Yeah.
I mean, that we're living in a dream world if we think our customers are going to park in the parking lot and come in. Parking is a problem in the up-down. You ask any of the business people right now, they look at it as a problem. With having no ordinances on the books at all, there's several sections that has caused a lot of problems.
What do you mean, no ordinances?
Well, we used to have
about when you can park, that sort of thing.
2-hour parking during the day. You know, I know the argument was that the police were not out there monitoring, but you know what? The police didn't need to. First of all, 80% of the people are going to follow the rule if the law is on the books. So you're only working with 20% of them, and they're people who, well, I'm not going to walk that far, so they're going to park in front of the person right next to them. At least if the law was there and I'm having troubles with someone over here, I can call the cops and I can say, will you monitor this guy because he's not supposed to be parking here and he is parking there all day, every day. There's a place over on First Avenue across from the courthouse. She tells me she comes before 8 o'clock every morning and parks there.
We're not talking about changing that part of our ordinance at all.
But I'm saying if we're losing 11 and we're already having problems with people finding parking and having parking problems, we're just creating another problem to deal with.
Okay. Councilman Vilhauer?
Kay, I've got a question. You made a reference to we several times. I think it's fair for us to ask, who are you representing, or who is the we that you're referring to, Kay?
Well, there's probably 5 or 6 people that called me and just said, here's some questions. If you're going to go, would you just ask? And, you know, the ones that have no backside to their businesses to receive any merchandise, they're very concerned because that's the only way they have to, you know, for a delivery to pull up, get their merchandise. And
they'll be able to do that. But we're not stopping that with this change. People will be delayed, yes. We might have to wait. I had to wait the other day on a side street when there was a delivery truck delivering stuff to Gather. And I waited. And the cars went by, and then I went around. And I know there's a fear in making a change. I don't think that this is going to be disastrous. I think this will be a good thing. I would not want to do this if I didn't truly believe this is a good thing for our community. And I recognize your fears. I had those same fears, and I've been able to work through them. And depending on what the council does tonight, I mean, some people are going to be happy and others are not. That's community action as it happens. And we as a community need to decide what's best. And there's going to be, whatever the council decides to do tonight, there will be people in disagreement with it. So I don't know that, I guess I'll leave that up to them to decide if they think it warrants not passing this.
Mayor, I do have a question.
For Kay? Or?
Actually, for Shane.
Okay. Councilman Davenport.
Shane, we talked about the parking angles changing slightly. Are they, which way are they changing? Are they changing so that it's, I'm not sure how you want it, so that it's less perpendicular or more perpendicular to the curb?
Less perpendicular. Basically what we do is we try to pull that tail end of the vehicles closer to in line with the curb, so that the angle is a little bit steeper. That will give us a little extra room in the travel lanes, and we've experienced no issues with the way we did that on First Avenue South. So I don't anticipate any real issues on Kemp Avenue either.
It actually helps visibility-wise as you're backing out too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilman Y?
Kay, I have a question for you. You said several communities went back to the two-way streets.
Well, I just know Aberdeen, Mitchell, and Sioux Falls all have one-way streets.
But they had changed it and then went back. And do you know the?
No,
they never went to two-way streets.
Well, Aberdeen told me that they went to the one-way 10 years ago, and they would not go back. Sioux Falls, I don't know how long they've had theirs. I think Mitchell has a one-way with parallel, like like Sarah was talking about, having one go like we did before, one opposite of the other. In Mitchell, they have a one-way, is what I was told, and both of them on both sides, kind of like what we are right this minute, where they're two-way on the parallel, is what Mitchell has.
Oops, excuse me. In Sioux Falls, the reason that they made the decision to continue to keep Main a one-way was when they converted the pavilion to an entertainment, the Washington Pavilion, because as Sarah said, the main purpose of a one-way street is to move traffic quickly out of town. And so otherwise they've converted all the rest of their streets to two-way and have even considered Main, but they've left it as a one-way so that they can empty out the pavilion and get the traffic out of town. Phillips Avenue had been one way, and the best thing they ever did to it was convert it to two-way. And I went to First District regarding the width, and Phillips and Kemp are exactly the same width, curb to curb. And I know people don't believe me, but they are also. And I just got another email talking about slowing down traffic, and Shane has mentioned it before about traffic calming. And when people have to kind of pay attention with the different trucks and things like that, traffic slows. They have a tendency to pay more attention to what businesses are there and what things are going on. It becomes safer for pedestrian traffic. It becomes safer for bicycles and all the things that we want to have come downtown to help improve. Some of the things you were talking about are exactly spot on. We want people down there for music. We want people down there to shop. We want people down there to bring their kids and spend time. And a safer, slower traffic will actually help increase that. There has been, I think I have a binder actually of reasons why two-way traffic is actually better. I would like nothing better than to have downtown full of cars all the time. And I understand that there's a perspective about parking. And I did my own survey of people from age 30 to 80 about if you couldn't park in front of your business, and maybe you were here, would that stop you from going? And the only comment I had was from one of the 80-year-olds who said, well, if the weather was crappy, I probably wouldn't get out if I couldn't park in front of the business, but then, well, maybe I shouldn't go down there anyway. Not a single other person said that not being able to park right in front of the business prevented them from going where they were going to go. People say that they go to one of the restaurants, they have to park all the way around the corner and then some. I think we have a perceived parking problem, not an actual parking problem. I think there are times of the day where there may or may not be more or less of a parking problem. But if you count and if you look during the day, I think we have more parking spots than we actually need. And I know that that's maybe my opinion, but I think we have a perceived parking problem versus an actual parking problem. And as I said earlier, I would like nothing better than for the entire downtown to be full of cars, top to bottom, front to back, and that just hasn't happened. And I know we're going to have to agree to disagree, but I, like Sarah, started out this process with like, not sure, and went into a lot of research, actually found that neighborhoods became safer once, and businesses became safer once traffic was returned to two-way versus one-way, and insurance rates went down, and there's a whole laundry list of benefits of two-way streets. So,
Sarah, you did bring up one that, and Shane probably be the one. How will stop signs and stoplights, and what are the game plans for those?
We have a set of plans. We're happy to give you a copy of them. The signals will be eliminated, and with the exception of the highway, and stops will be four-way stops in most of the intersections. Shane, if you can quickly summarize the changes.
Sure. So starting on the west end, 3rd Street West, and the intersection of Kemp is currently a four-way stop. We would continue that. The intersection of 2nd Street West would continue to be a two-way stop, with the stopping being on 2nd. 1st Street West will be converted to an all-way stop. It currently only has a two-way stop. The intersection of Broadway and Kemp, which is currently a signal system, would become a all-way stop. The intersection of Maple, which is also signalized, would become an all-way stop. And the intersection of 2nd Street East, which is signalized, would become an all-way stop. And then we would revert back to two-way stops on the side streets for 3rd Street, 4th Street, etc. So,
does that answer your questions? Okay, thank you for sharing.
Can I have one more question for you, Kay? Is parking an issue on Kemp, and do the uptown businesses police that themselves if an employee is parking there or anything like that? I mean,
nothing we can do.
Okay, is it customers parking on Kemp Avenue, or is it employees?
I'd love to
In
say
your
they're
opinion.
all customers. No, and this has been a problem for years. The biggest violators are either business owners or employees of other businesses who don't want to walk that far either. They won't park in the city parking lots, even if they're provided in every block, they wouldn't do that. But they'll park in front of the neighbors. I mean, we have parking issues right over here. I mean, and there's just nothing you can do about it because there's no ordinance in place to take care of it.
So maybe they could police themselves a little?
Well, they would if there was an ordinance, but
our ordinance says 24 hours max, and if there's a car that's parked there longer than that, then I mean we've tried different different regulations, and this is where we are now. If I mean that's outside this conversation here, but
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kay. There's a familiar face.
Randy Tupper, former council member and board chair of the Urban Renewal Board. I have put in countless hours in this project when I was on the council. I think a lot of you know that I was very adamant that I believe it has to be done. A lot of research was put into this. Not only, the one that really opened my eyes, of course, was the charrette, as we all sat around the tables and split into different groups, and then we'd meet after the group and we'd highlight everything on the wall. The people that were there remember that. One of the things that always was toward the top was two-way streets, to revert back to two-way streets. If you remember, they were converted to one-way streets after an agreement with the Department of Transportation, I believe back in the early to mid-'70s. And the design was when they rebuilt Highway 81, and they wanted a thoroughfare through Watertown. And what is a thoroughfare but a way of moving traffic through town fast? Now, if you look at a downtown business compared to any other business, that's along the highway, what would you say the average storefront is? 50, 75 feet? That's their idea of, or that's their signage. That is the signage they have. One thing when you convert to two-way traffic, and I know this for a fact, and I'm going to go back to, Beth made the comment, they converted Phillips from, they didn't convert it from one way, they converted it from actually they made it into a pedestrian mall, and they did convert it. So, but I took the time to contact Heath Hofteaser, who is the traffic engineer in Sioux Falls, and I asked him some questions, and I asked him what the average speed was on Phillips Avenue. And of course, through some of their camera systems and stuff, he was able to give me that, and this is quite a while ago. The average speed on Phillips Avenue in the 3-block area that's the busiest is 9 miles an hour. I took it upon myself one day last spring to check the average speed limit on Kemp Avenue. If you go in the middle of the block where you're going to have your highest speed, it was 17 miles an hour. If you got 50 foot to show your wares, how fast do you want them to go? I would say 9 miles an hour would work a little bit better. You talk about vehicles are getting bigger. Now you got two on both sides of the road. Right now I got two on both sides of the road. What difference does it make? And actually, when you change directions, it's going to make it safer when they're backing out. They're not both backing out the same way. Vehicles aren't going to get any smaller. They're going to continue to get bigger. Pedestrian accidents in Sioux Falls are very, unless they're on the, like Minnesota Avenue is probably one of the worst, but downtown in the Phillips Avenue area is very, very minimal, because I think Shane was the one that a long time ago came up, but somebody said, what we're going to do for speed limit, and he made the comment that we didn't think we needed to, because it is going to have a calming effect. If you go downtown, Sioux Falls, busiest downtown in the state of South Dakota, and I've spent a lot of time, that's one of my most favorite places to go, is down on Phillips Avenue, and watch it, or you drive down it, it's very, very slow traffic. And people are having to pay attention, because it is, just as Beth said, and I found out the same way. I went to First District one day and had them pull it up. They're both exactly 55 feet. It works very good for a very, very good, very vibrant downtown. Now, every study we've ever did, like I say, the charrette was probably one of the other ones. Me and Beth have sat through a couple other ones. Everything leans toward changing your streets back to two-way traffic. I remember when Retail Strategies came to town, and they do work with downtown districts. They couldn't believe that we still had one-way streets. When we told them we were changing the one last year to two-way, it was just like a couple kids in a candy store, put it that way. But I mean, there's a lot of research they put into there. I mean, if I took the time to actually borrow a radar gun and check the traffic, I mean, I put a lot of time into that. And I've been very a huge proponent of, I think we need to. I remember growing up in Watertown. I lived here my whole life, and that's when Watertown was vibrant downtown. It's not just the the businesses that have moved out of downtown. At that time, it was. But our downtown is starting to slowly thrive. And if we don't do the changes, I probably called 12 Midwest cities that have made a change, and I never had one of them tell me that they were sorry they changed. And I don't have I didn't keep that stuff, but just off the top of my head, there was some, when they did a resurfacing downtown in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, they changed a couple of their streets back to two-way. And if you look at Sioux Falls, most of their one-way are they're not the arterial streets, they're the side streets. La Crosse, Alaska, Jamestown, Minot, called people in all those cities that are affiliated with their downtown association, and they all agreed it was the best thing they ever did. So, anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much for sharing that. You did a lot of work and research, and I think it's helpful it's helpful to me.
Yeah, it was. I think Shane can tell you, I was kind of between him and Rob. I was always bugging him about, when we're going to do this. So, and I'm glad that last year they did the other one to, I haven't seen any problem with the other one. And like you say, it's the same width. Mm-hmm. It's that visual that it does look smaller because of the height of the buildings. Mm-hmm. But I would like to see you guys move forward, and I think it's going to be very, very great for the downtown to change back. And I think you're going to find it's going to be safer for pedestrians. It's going to slow people down. What do you do when you slow down? You look around a little bit more. And when you only got 50 to 75 feet to show your storefront and what you have, I mean, we want commerce downtown, and that's going to help that a lot. So,
thank you. Anyone have questions for Randy?
Thanks, Randy.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Would anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask if there's any more discussion. Councilman Vilhauer?
I think it's probably worth, for those that didn't catch the committee discussion earlier, Shane, for you to touch on again what effect the highway stoplight could have on the timetable for this. Would you want to discuss that, Shane?
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. The state DOT controls the intersection of Highway 81 and Kemp. The improvements that the city would need to do is add an extra leg to the signal system. We have a cost estimate to do that. However, in our contact with the DOT, they have a desire to enhance the entire signal system there to accommodate the latest technology related to the ADA crossing compliance. What that means is they do a voice-activated system where it tells you whether it's safe to cross, how much time you have left to cross, those kind of details. And if they desire to do that, it'll probably delay our conversion project potentially. But we need to get more details from the state as to their timeline for completing that project. If they let us enhance the one discussion that could happen is that they let us enhance our leg, and then with the idea that the overall accommodations for the additional technology happens. That could be one path. If they want us to wait till the whole project comes together, we may have a delay. And I'm going to pursue that with the DOT staff in more detail to kind of feel that out. But the city's desire would be to commit to going to one way and then work out that detail with the DOT so that we can get this project done. So,
thank you. Councilman Danforth?
I want to tag on that one just for a second, Shane. Forget this project. If the DOT was coming in and wanted to make that upgrade to that light system there, irrelevant of us making this change, would there be a participation on our end with that?
I would guess no, but that's hard decisions to say because it's our citizens and our pedestrian walkway system that engages that intersection. So they may reach out to the city for a physical contribution to that. I'm not sure.
Usually they don't when they do
I would think not.
DOT
but
projects in town.
Right. Okay. You see where I'm going with that is that's nothing that we're really asking for. We're asking for the whatever it is that we're asking for, the addition on there.
Right. We need the additional mast arm and light system. What they're saying is if we're going to do that, they would like to upgrade the whole intersection to accommodate the new technology. Whether or not those two things coincide well time-wise or not is what we need to determine.
Any other question or comments? Okay, we have a motion, second on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? We do have a need to go into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2 this evening in order to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual matters. I do not expect any action upon coming out. So is there a motion and second to move into executive session? Moved by Vilhauer, second by Manti. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We're in executive session.